It happened so fast it almost felt unreal. One night I was sitting in my living room staring at a violation letter taped to my door, and just hours later the ground shook hard enough to crack half the houses in my neighborhood. Mine stood solid. The same HOA that fined me thousands of dollars for reinforcing my home had just been proven dead wrong by an earthquake. But before I got that vindication, I was dragged through weeks of fines, threats, humiliation, and the smug tyranny of one woman who thought she owned us all. My name's Nathan Carter. I'm 58, a retired structural engineer, and a widower. I moved into Shady Pines 6 years ago thinking I was buying peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into the kingdom of Karen Myers, HOA president and self-appointed guardian of community harmony. She's in her 50s, blonde curls wound so tight they look painful clipboard fused to her wrist eyes like she's constantly smelling sour milk. Everyone knew her, everyone feared her, and I thought I could keep my head down. That was before I found the crack in my wall. At first it was tiny, just a faint, jagged line over the bay window. Most people would have painted over it, but I'm not most people. I spent 22 years in seismic retrofitting. I've seen what ignoring that kind of fracture costs. I lost my wife, Mary Ann, in the '94 Northridge quake because our brand new apartment was built with shortcuts. I know the sound of a structure giving up. That hairline crack felt like a siren. So I documented everything, checked the crawl space, and sure enough, one of my support beams was shifting. Not catastrophic yet, but one bad tremor could bring the house down. I hired a trusted crewman I'd worked with years ago. We reinforced the beams, braced the walls, anchored the foundation. All clean, discreet, invisible from the street. Out of courtesy, I'd even emailed the HOA with a full engineering report. No one responded. Typical. Still, I thought I'd done my part. Until I stepped outside with an iced tea and saw Karen on the sidewalk glaring at my house like it had personally offended her. She snapped a few pictures, turned on her heel, and walked off. The next morning, I found the envelope. $1,200. A violation for unauthorized structural modifications. 14 days to reverse them. Reverse seismic reinforcements. What did they expect me to do? Unbolt safety? I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. I mailed back copies of my report receipts, even delivery confirmations from the contractors. Their response, double the fine. Accused me of disrespectful tone. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about ego. Karen's ego. I tried calling the HOA office, but the receptionist, Trish Acrylic Nails clicking like a metronome, just told me to wait for the next review cycle. Next month. Meanwhile, I'm staring at a letter ordering me to compromise the stability of my house in 10 days or face liens and legal action. When I pushed back, Karen escalated. Second notice taped right to my door. Fines bumped to $2,400, threats of court. They even started tagging my trash bins with bogus violations, revoking visitor parking passes, sending strangers with clipboards to take pictures of my porch. It was harassment, plain and simple. And it got in my head. There were nights I sat at my desk binder of reports in front of me and thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I was too stubborn, too haunted by Mary Ann's death. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe I should just take it all down and pay the fines. What if I was clinging to paranoia? The doubt cut deep, and I almost gave in. But then I remembered pulling Mary Ann's hand in that collapsing apartment, the ceiling caving before we reached the door. I remembered the coroner telling me she never had a chance, and I swore I'd never let blind authority bully me into silence again. That's when I called Miguel Alvarez, an old friend turned TV reporter. Let me guess, he said before I even finished explaining, it's the HOA. Within a day, he had a camera crew in my backyard. I told him everything, held up the violation letter, laid out the geological survey. When the segment aired, neighbors I barely knew started knocking on my door. I thought it was just about rules, one said. Another offered to speak on my behalf. For the first time, it wasn't me against Karen. It was me and a few brave souls against her entire board. And then the earth itself joined the fight. 2 weeks later, just before dawn, a tremor rolled under Shady Pines. Only a 5.2, but enough to crack garage walls, split decorative arches, shift gutters off their lines. Neighbors stumbled outside in their pajamas, staring at fractures in their driveways. My house. Solid. Not a scratch. I ran my hand over the steel brackets Karen had called unsightly and felt vindication hum under my palm. But Karen didn't back down. She summoned me to a disciplinary hearing in the clubhouse. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige souls. She sat at the center table, flanked by her khaki-wearing minions lacing her fingers like a judge. "Mr. Carter," she said without looking up, "you've repeatedly violated community regulations." I didn't sit. No, I reinforced my home against a natural disaster while your board ignored every warning. And instead of thanking me, you fined me. Her nostrils flared. You bypassed our architectural committee. I submitted a full engineering report weeks ago. No one responded. You didn't wait for approval. My house was at risk. My voice cracked louder than I meant. And so is every other home here if the fault line shifts again. The bob-haired woman at her side muttered, "This isn't about geology, Mr. Carter. It's about order." Order, I shot back. Is order going to hold your roof up when the ground moves, or will symmetry keep your children safe at night? Karen slammed a folder on the table. Photos of my porch columns. Tiny steel plates powder-coated to match the trim, barely visible. Non-compliant, she hissed. I almost laughed. Those brackets are rated for an 8.0 quake. The ones your rules forbid could stop a roof from crushing someone's skull. But sure, let's talk paint shades instead of survival. Silence. Even her board shifted uncomfortably. I leaned closer. I lost my wife in '94 because a building looked nice but wasn't built right. And you want me to repeat that mistake so your neighborhood brochure stays pretty? Not a chance. I left that room knowing I hadn't convinced Karen, but I'd rattled her cage. Outside, I saw neighbors who'd been listening. Some clapped quietly. Word was spreading. Days later, county inspectors rolled into Shady Pines after another quake, this one smaller, but sharper. Channel 5 showed up too. Inspectors marked cracks on half the block, then stood in front of my house, nodded, and wrote one word. Stable. Miguel filmed me holding up the violation letters next to the still-standing brackets. "What's the takeaway?" he asked. I stared into the camera. When a man reinforces his house to protect his life and property and an HOA fines him for it, that's not enforcement. That's negligence. And when the ground shakes, clipboards don't matter. Strength does. That broadcast lit a fire. Neighbors organized a petition to recall the board. A lawyer named Olivia Tran joined in filing an official complaint with the state. She held up one of Karen's emails at the next meeting, "Earthquake. Paranoia is not a valid excuse for disrupting community uniformity," and the room gasped. Even Bob, the khaki man, stood and said, "We were wrong. We forgot what we're here for." He resigned on the spot. Karen tried to hold on, jaw tight, eyes darting. But when the ballots were counted, 92% of homeowners voted no confidence. Her reign ended that night. No speech, no fight, just the hollow click of her heels as she walked out of the clubhouse clipboard, dangling like a broken crown. And that's where I'll leave it. Because sometimes the real earthquake isn't the one that cracks the ground, it's the one that cracks the illusion of power.